Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak Reuben speaking to you from south of Jerusalem, here in the beautiful and holy land of Israel. Today is the 29th day of the month of Kislev 5784. It is the 5th day of Chanukah. It is Erev Rosh Chodesh Tevet, meaning that this evening, I'm recording this in the afternoon, this evening, Tuesday evening, begins Rosh Chodesh Tevet, the first day of the new month of Tevet. And of course, Chanukah is the only holiday in the Hebrew calendar that actually begins in one month and ends in the next, because, of course, it begins on the 25th day of Kislev, the day that the Holy Temple was liberated by the Maccabees, by the Hashmonaim, from the Syrian Greek oppressors and occupiers. So the holiday begins on the 25th, and it concludes on the, the third day of Tevet, if I'm not mistaken. In any case, tonight is Rosh Chodesh Tevet, the new month of Tevet, so every year when we have Chanukah, we always have a Rosh Chodesh in Chanukah. Some years the Rosh Chodesh actually falls on Shabbat, and so we have a triple, a trifecta, Chanukah, Shabbat, and Rosh Chodesh. But of course this year it is this evening. Rosh Chodesh is this evening, Tuesday evening, Wednesday, and so it falls on the 6th night or the 6th light of Chanukah. But that's tonight. We're still in the 29th day of Kislev, final day of the month of Kislev. And by the way, it is the 12th day of December 2023. And this coming Shabbat, we read Parshat Miketz. At the end of is what Miketz means. And it begins in the book of Genesis, chapter 41, verse 1, concludes chapter 44, verse 17. And of course, it is the continuation of the story of Yosef and his brothers, a story that every year when I read it, I get choked up, tears come to my eyes, because it is so moving, it is so relevant. Brothers who fight and brothers who make up and embrace. And of course, so much of what's happening here in Israel is all about being brothers and sisters, brotherhood, standing up, fighting for one another, fighting for our brothers, fighting for our sisters, doing exactly what we will, a little bit of a spoiler alert here, we will find out in this story of Yosef and his brothers, that when push comes to shove, we are here for one another. That is the motto, that is the credo of the people of Israel, that we are arivim echad l'sheni, we are all responsible for one another. And you know what? We learn time and time again that we really have no one else other than Hashem in heaven who looks over us and protects us. No one else in the world to stand by us when push comes to shove. Yes, there are always good people, righteous people who stand with the people of Israel, but in terms of institutions, governments, politicians, pundits, nah. A lot of fair weather friends at best, but when push comes to shove, like I said, we are on our own, and on our own with Hashem, and really we don't need more than that. We just need to always realize that. And every day there are new stories of barbarism that occurred on the 7th of October, barbarism perpetrated by Hamas, and barbarism perpetrated by Hamas to this day in Gaza against fellow Gazans, and against, of course, we're learning stories about what happened to the Israelis who were in captivity and have been freed. Again, it's about 100, and there's still about 140 who are still in captivity and have not yet been freed. God willing, we will be able to free them soon. I don't count on a hostage exchange. I do count on and pray for a rescue mission by our amazing soldiers. But again, stories are coming out on the atrocities committed to our hostages, kidnapped men, women, children, infants, elderly, while they were in captivity, being operated on, having someone having a bullet removed from their leg without any anesthesia, someone having bones in their foot that were shattered, being reset backwards. I mean, this is sick. This is sick. Elderly people denied their life necessary medications. Children being made to watch the atrocities performed by Hamas on the 7th of October. And if they were to begin to cry, they would be threatened with a gun against their head. Being drugged, not having enough food, not being able to shower or bathe for the entire duration of the time they were there, which was over 40 days. And I'm sure the people still there now, over 60 days, are going through the same, if not worse. And that's just not the complete list of the atrocities that have so far been revealed. And again, for many of these people, including people who survived the 7th and people who have returned from Gaza after being taken to Gaza as hostages, the testimony doesn't come out right away because of the trauma. It takes a while for many people, if they can at all, to open up and to share, to even be able to share with themselves what they experienced, what they saw. And so we will probably be hearing a testimony for some time now. But there's also, again, the stories that keep coming out of incredible heroism, incredible just people giving their lives so that others could live, people knowingly throwing themselves on grenades when they saw there was no other way to save themselves or their friends, brothers, fellow soldiers. They just threw themselves on a grenade to take the entire impact in their body, knowing that it would be their last act. Messages. Many soldiers write a testament, sort of like a last will and testament, before they go into battle, that for their family, if and it always begins, if you're reading this, it means I'm not with you anymore. And their messages are just, I have no regrets. I've done what is the greatest thing I could do, which is to give my life for my country. Anyway, these acts of heroism, of true brotherhood, of true being there for one another, it's just incredible. And, here in Israel, as you know, before the 7th of October, Israel was tearing at one another at their throats, all sorts of, divisions, political divisions in lifestyle, accusations, and it was ugly. And it's really, we have despicable enemies, and we had a huge failure of military intelligence and preparedness, but ultimately the disaster and the tragedy was a result of the people of Israel being disunited, fighting with one another, tearing at each other's throats. That's ultimately what was the green light for this horrible event. And it was a wake-up call for sure, but it's also made me realize that being there for one another, being united, fighting for one another, sacrificing our lives for one another is what we're really all about. That's natural. That's what comes to us naturally. The division, the fighting, the animosity that preceded this for the past year, that's not natural. That's not normal for us. That was manufactured, and I'm convinced about it more than ever. Because I'll tell you why. Because in the past week or so, it's beginning to sprout again. Beginning to be people protesting and calling for this one's got to go and that one's got to go and these people are no good and those people are no good, and they're not doing it. They're someone's behind it. Someone is organizing it. Someone is inciting, and someone is paying for it. I know that. We knew it before, and it's even clearer now. Because there are efforts being made in the middle of the war, and the war's not even over. We still have hostages in Gaza. We still have soldiers in Gaza. We still have an enemy in Gaza that hasn't been eliminated yet, not to mention the enemy in Judea and Samaria, which hasn't been eliminated yet, not to mention the enemy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, which hasn't been eliminated yet, and not to mention Iran, the puppet masters behind this whole thing. And not to mention there are other puppets, the Houthis in Yemen, who are attacking indiscriminately ships in the Red Sea. And yet there are these people who are returning now, coming out from under the rocks where they hid themselves, I imagine, and are inciting again, trying to create division again in our people. And someone's behind it. Yes, there are some bad people here in Israel and some bad people outside of Israel that have formed a league. And they are our enemies. They are our enemies. And some of them, like I say, are here in Israel, and some of them are outside of Israel. And I know the names and faces of some of them because they are former politicians, former generals, bitter people who, I don't know, they have an agenda which is, I think, a mixture of vanity, of jealousy, of hatred, and of ambition, and of money. All these things creating a poison, and we cannot allow this poison to infect us again as it had this year before October 7th. You know, the October 7th, as horrendous, difficult, horrible as it was in a way a cure for the sickness that had been taking over the body of Israel before October 7th. And October 7th just cleared that out in an instant. And we cannot allow this infection, this COVID of hatred to be re-injected into our system. And there are people now, very few people, but they're very loud. And of course, if it's poison, the media, wherever they are, will amplify it. That's what the media does. And so we have to be very careful not to be swept up in this, and we need to work together to eliminate it. It is an enemy just as Hamas is an enemy. And in a way, it's every bit as dangerous, because when they cause division in Israel, that's when Hamas and that's when Iran and all its proxies strike. That has been made abundantly clear. Hanukkah. It's been a beautiful Hanukkah. Our soldiers are pounding Hamas, and Hamas terrorists are surrendering by the hundreds. The leadership of Hamas is still hiding deep underground. The citizens of Gaza, the Gazans, are cursing Hamas. The only time Hamas comes out from under the covers is when they hijack aid trucks, trucks being brought in from Egypt with food and fuel meant for the Gazans who have been displaced by the war. And in broad daylight, Hamas terrorists hijack the trucks and drive away with them. And Israel has been capturing this on film. It's clear for everybody to see. So Israel is closing in and getting closer and closer to our goal of completely annihilating Hamas, their leadership, their rank and file, and ultimately their leadership in other countries. And of course, the price we're paying for it is very heavy as soldiers are falling, and every soldier is a complete world. Every soldier is a dear brother, a dear sister, a dear son and daughter, dear father. So we weep and we mourn and we salute our brave soldiers who have fallen, and we will continue until we have reached our goal, which is the complete annihilation of Hamas. Israel needs to just reinstate ourselves in Gaza militarily and, as far as I'm concerned, civilian rule as well. And God willing, we will see Jewish settlement again in Gaza. Will that happen? That's going to depend on the vision and the courage and the determination of our leadership. But God willing, we will see the return of Jewish presence, historic Jewish presence, because until 2005, when Israel very, very foolishly evacuated all the Jews from Gaza, over 8,000 Jews, removed the army from Gaza, which brought on this disaster. But until that year, until that time, there had been continuous Jewish presence in Gaza for thousands of years. People think today that Gaza is somehow some kind of off limits. It never was part of Israel or something, but there have been Jews in Gaza and communities in Gaza and synagogues in Gaza for thousands of years. So Chanukah, the holiday, it's a very popular holiday, not only among Jews, but of course the world, embraces Chanukah. It's a beautiful holiday. You light candles. It's clearly because of its nearness in the calendar to Christmas. It's seen sort of like, the Jewish Christmas. There's lights, there's gifts, there's celebration. I want you to know that Chanukah is about the Maccabean rebellion against the Syrian Greek occupiers after Alexander the Great took over, conquered the entire Middle East and more. And after he died, his empire was broken up among his three principal generals, and a general and his descendants, because they became kings, who had control over the land of Israel, Judea. Antiochus was the king during the time of Chanukah. They not only wanted to encourage Greek culture, but under the rule of Antiochus, they wanted to completely suppress and wipe out Jewish culture, the Jewish faith, Jewish practice, Jewish tradition, the Torah. And they made many edicts against teaching, against practicing, against the circumcision, against Rosh Chodesh, against Shabbat. And of course, it all blew up when they were compelling Jews to make idolatrous offerings with impure animals and it blew up in the city of Modi'in, a city that exists to this day in Israel, central Israel, where there's a stronghold and many priestly families live there. And of course, Mattatyahu and his 5 sons. Mattatyahu himself killed a Jew and the Syrian Greek officer who compelled that Jew to perform an idolatrous offering in Modi'in, and that was the beginning of the uprising. My point is that this was a war for Jewish independence, for the Jewish faith, for the Jewish continuity in the Jewish homeland, ancestral homeland of Israel. It happened 2,000 some hundred years ago, and that's exactly what we're fighting today. It's the exact same fight. So all you people who think that Chanukah is such a cool holiday, yeah, it is a cool holiday. It's a Zionist holiday. It's a holiday of Jewish independence, of Jewish pride, of the Jewish nation. It's not simply potato latkes and donuts and a miracle of oil, which was God's sign of approval. And it's not just gift giving, and it's not just a holiday that is celebrated in close proximity to Christmas. It is the holiday of the celebration of Jewish independence, military independence, civilian independence in the land of Israel. Jewish tradition, Jewish faith, the Torah, that's what it's all about. Don't kid yourself. If that doesn't, if you don't identify with that in some way, then don't celebrate Hanukkah. But all you who do celebrate Hanukkah, and many people do, and they think it's a cool thing, that's a fun thing, that's wonderful. But they have no idea what it's really all about. And if they do, some of those people would be appalled that they actually celebrated it, because some of those people who like to wish us a happy Hanukkah aren't really in our corner and don't really support the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, the Jewish faith, but on the contrary, are against it. So again, that's what Hanukkah's about. Love it or leave it. Love us or leave us alone. Israel's not asking anybody else to fight their fights, just like we didn't way back when, in the time of the Maccabees, and not even now. We're fighting our own fight. Let us do it. Stop calling for ceasefire. Stop calling for humanitarianness. Let us fight our fight. Let us do what we need to do. We've been here before. We know what needs to be done. Let's take a moment or few and look at our Parsha Miketz. Book of Genesis, chapter 41, verse 1, Hebrew, then English. Vahi miketz shenatayim yamim ufara'o holem v'hine omed al ya'or v'hine mina ya'or olot sheva parot yafot maro'ev uvriot basar v'tire'ena ba'ahu v'hine sheva parot ahirot olot achareyen mina ya'or ra'ot maro'ev v'dakot basar v'ta'amodna etzel ha'parot al safat ya'or v'tochalna ha'parot ra'ot המראה דקות הבשר את 7 הפרות יפות המראה והבריות ויקץ פרעה. It happened at the end of 2 years to the day. Okay, we're picking up where we left off last week's Parsha, which was Yosef was in prison with, and there were 2 other men in there, the chief baker and the chief wine. What's that word? That fancy word in French? I don't remember it right now. The chief wine drink bartender, drink master. Let's look here. What do we forget? What we called it? Cupbearer. Okay, the official cupbearer of Pharaoh, and they each had a dream. And Yosef, with the help of Hashem, basically channeling Hashem, was able to interpret their dreams, and the dream of the baker was the end of his life, was foretelling the end of his life in 3 days, and the dream of the cupbearer was foretelling that he would be released from prison and return to his former position as cupbearer for Pharaoh. And Yosef said to him, when you get out, please tell Pharaoh that I'm here. Let's just look at that for a second. He says this. Joseph said to this is from last week in chapter 40, verse 12. Yosef said to him, this is the interpretation. Okay, I'm going to skip past. Then he said in verse 14, if only you would think of me with yourself when he benefits you, and you will do me a kindness, if you please, and mention me to Pharaoh that you would take me out of this building. For indeed I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing for them that put me in a pit. In fact, okay, so Yosef made a special request, and of course the cupbearer didn't mention Yosef to Pharaoh when he got out. It was 2 years later. That's why it mentions 2 years to the day, 2 years after that. And our sages tell us that this is what happens when you entrust people. You entrust someone, your fate, to someone and not to Hashem. Yosef was relying on this Egyptian cupbearer to do him a favor. He's not going to do him a favor. So it was another 2 years before Yosef's name was mentioned to Pharaoh, and we're going to read about that right now. And you think about it, why would the cupbearer mention Yosef? He just got out, by the skin of his teeth from prison and got restored to his old position. Last thing he wants to do is talk about that to Pharaoh. Can you do me a favor? This guy I know. I mean, really, what was Yosef thinking? Anyway, so Pharaoh has the dream. We all know the story very well, I believe. Pharaoh has this dream about the cows, the beautiful cows, and then thin, ravaged-looking cows come up and they eat the fat cows. And then he has a second dream. Same thing with wheat, with bundles of wheat, good wheat, and then bad wheat that just consumes the good wheat. And he is very troubled by these two dreams, and he asks all his wise men, all his necromancers. I have it translation here for an interpretation. Everybody's looking at each other. I don't know. Nobody could do it. And then the chief cupbearer, the chamberlain of the cupbearer, spoke up before Pharaoh, saying, this is in verse 9 of chapter 41, my transgression do I mention today. Pharaoh had become incensed at his servants and placed me in the ward of the house of the chamberlain of the butchers, me and the chamberlain of the bakers. We dreamt a dream on the same night, I and he, and each of one according to the interpretation of his dream did we dream, and there with us was a Hebrew youth, a slave of the chamberlain of the butchers. We related to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. He interpreted for each in accordance with his dream, and it was that just as he interpreted for us, so did it happen. Me he restored to my post, and him he hanged. So Pharaoh, upon hearing this, sent and summoned Yosef, and they rushed him from the dungeon. He shaved and changed his clothes, and he came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Yosef, I dreamt a dream, but no one could interpret it. Now I've heard it said of you that you comprehend the dream to interpret. Yosef answered Pharaoh, saying, this is beyond me. That is beyond me. It is God who will respond with Pharaoh's welfare. So Yosef is rushed from the pit. They scrub him. They change his clothes, make him presentable before Pharaoh. And there he is, this kid. Okay, so at this point he's 30 years old. He was 17 when he was taken by his brothers and put in a pit and then sold to the Midianim, who sold him to the Ishmaelim, who sold him to the Egyptians. And now, 13 years later, he is 30 years old, standing before Pharaoh, the most powerful man on earth. And he interprets for Pharaoh his dream. 7 bad cows and 7 bad bundles of wheat are the 7 good cows and good bundles of wheat are 7 good years of plenty in the land, and then followed by 7 bad years, 7 years of famine. And Yosef doesn't stop there. He presents a plan. He says, Pharaoh, you gotta appoint someone who's really smart, who really knows stuff, and have him oversee the collecting of the excess good, the excess bounty that people more than beyond subsistence over those 7 years, and put them in storage and then have them distributed through the 7 bad years. And of course, Pharaoh is so impressed by Yosef and his advice that he says, you are that man. You are the wisest man, and I'm going to put you in a position of power that only I, Pharaoh, will be over you. And he gives Yosef a ring, puts him in special clothes, gives him a chariot that he can ride throughout the land. Yosef becomes an overnight superstar. He's a rock star. He's in charge. He's been given control of everything that needs to be done concerning the upcoming famine, concerning the welfare of the people. And he only needs to answer to Pharaoh. And other than that, he is the most powerful man in the land, and basically on earth, because Egypt was the most powerful country at the time. And as soon as the 7 bad years began, and there was famine not only in Egypt but all throughout the world, he was the most powerful man in the world because he had power over the distribution of food. And of course, as we know, Yaakov is in the land of Canaan with his brothers, with his sons, the 11 remaining sons, because Yosef is gone. And just before I get to that, let's just not forget to mention that Pharaoh even gave to Yosef the daughter of Potiphar, known as Osnat, to marry, and they had 2 children before the famine began. 2 children were Manasseh and Ephraim. And Midrash tells us that Dinah, the sister of Yosef, after she, we know the story. Remember the story from we read about 2 weeks ago. She was raped by Shechem in the city of Shechem, and then the brothers avenged her rape by killing all the male inhabitants of Shechem. And then we don't hear about Dinah, right? She disappears from the story. But the Midrash tells us that she was actually sent down to Egypt, and that she married the Kohen On. It's in this translation, it's chief of On. On is a place or a name, perhaps, but I think it's also Kohen On. It's also the priest of On. And she had a daughter, and that daughter was Osnat. So the Midrash sort of brings us full circle. Oh, Dinah comes back into the picture, and she becomes the mother of the 2 future tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim. And that's how the Midrash reconnects Dinah with the saga of the children of Israel. Make of it what you will. And then, as I started to say, the brothers are in Canaan with their father Yaakov, and they need food. So Yaakov sends them down to Egypt to get food, and they have to report immediately, of course, to Yosef, because he's the distributor of food. And they don't recognize him, and why would they? It's 13 years later, and he is no longer a kid but a man, and he's now dressed and robed and made out as an Egyptian. And the last thing they would ever suspect is that it's Yosef, but he does recognize them, and he really is going to run their something over the coals here, because he remembers what they did. Here is the music. I'm going to call it quits right now. I wish everybody a Chanukah Sameach and a Chodesh Tov tonight. Have a very good new month. And thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.